Hello, welcome to ADHD Wellness Co. My name is Gaia Broda, and I show you how to find long-term natural solutions to your ADHD so you can watch your symptoms dissipate like they have for myself. And today I have a special episode with my really good friend and neighbor, Nicole, and she's going to share her journey and story living with debilitating anxiety, where she had two big rock bottom moments in her life where she was suicidal and wasn't sure if she wanted to continue because the anxiety left her trapped in her own mind. Her mind would just shut down and she couldn't say what she wanted to say. She couldn't do what she wanted to do. And she completely lost herself in that. And she didn't even know who she was anymore. So she's going to share her journey, which also includes her finding medication and how that's worked for her and what she sees for herself going forward with regards to meds. So if you're someone who struggles with anxiety or anxious tendencies, this conversation is for you. And let me know in the comments if you like this conversation interview style of video. It's the first time I've done this. And if you want more of it, I can do that for you. Or if there's something else you'd love to see, also let me know in the comments. And hit subscribe if you haven't already. Enjoy. Tell me about your med story.
Yeah, so I am currently on sertraline. I think, 100 milligrams. That's
for anxiety?
For anxiety, yeah. It took me a really long time to, get to a place, where I thought that I needed, outside help, and just the mind hurdle of having being on meds. That was a big one. But
how long have you been on it now and feeling good on it?
I started, oh man, I think the first time I went on it I was 25 or 26, and it followed a bit of an episode. I ended up being taken to Emerge, I basically had my boyfriend at the time take me because I was just I'm going to kill myself. Can I say? Can we
say
talk
whatever you want?
Okay.
Thank you for sharing.
And I really was just in a place where I was just if I don't get immediate help right now, I don't see myself continuing. So anyways, at Emerge, I was talking to a psychiatrist there, and she was just kind of going over some of the options. And kind of up until that point I had just been, I don't know if it was a pride thing or what it was exactly. Maybe my upbringing was part of it, but I just hadn't really thought of meds as a viable option for me. It just meant that I think it maybe felt like I was accepting that I was a flawed person and I couldn't do life on my own without help, and that was just not a pill I was ready to swallow.
Love the fun.
So after getting out of Emerge, I didn't have a family doctor at the time, but I had this doctor I was seeing at one of the walk-in clinics by my house, and she kind of knew my file and stuff, and so I was asking her about kind of different medications, and she ended up putting me on Zoloft, which is sertraline, and it was a really low dose, and she also gave me Ativan because I think at the time just everything was very severe, and it was just hard to get through a day. So I don't know, I feel Ativan really affects everyone differently. For me, it didn't really do anything. So, and I had also heard about like addiction issues with Ativan. So, like after trying it once or twice, I was like, okay, that's not worth it for me. But the Zoloft, I started to notice after a couple weeks. I was like, oh, like I'm able to do this thing now that I really struggled with a few weeks ago, and like it wasn't I didn't really necessarily like feel different in my day to day, or not in like a noticeable way. It was like it was more kind of looking back, and I mean the way that it works is like cumulative, so it is kind of like a slow progression. So anyways, I think I was on it for about a year, and I was just like, great, I'm better now.
Yeah.
And so I like weaned off of it, and it just started to like things started to kind of go back to like the way that they used to be, to the point where it was like really affecting my like friendships, relationship, all of that was really like coming up again. And I basically had like my boyfriend at the time. I think he basically, I don't know if he said this like explicitly, but it was like an ultimatum. Like I had to like do something or like the relationship was over. So I was just like, oh, like Zoloft worked before. So I went back on it, and I was on it for like a few months, and I started doing like counseling as well. And the combination of those two for me was like the real game changer. And the relationship ended, I think, kind of like 3 or 4 months after that anyways.
And did you notice, like, when you started doing counseling, a significant effect, or actually, like, fast forward to now and looking back, did you notice a significant effect from, like, counseling?
Yeah. Definitely. That was like the step that, where I feel like I became like more in tune with like myself and being able to like connect with my intuition. The thing that was great about Zoloft is I don't think I would have ever started seeing a counselor if I wasn't like having that help with like regulating first, because it was hard to get out of the door for like groceries, and that's just like you gotta eat, like, but it was so hard. I would go shopping like late at night, so there wouldn't be like anyone else in the store, and like, you know, I was in school at the time, and that was, you know, yeah, I was just always like up here, so anything else above like the absolute bare minimum, and even sometimes the bare minimum, I couldn't like actually handle. So
How are you finding it today? Because you're taking meds today.
yeah.
Do you find that this is something that you're like, this is my solution long term? Or do you see something changing for you?
Um, I think I'm open to a change. I'm not, it's not something I want to like rush into, because I've been back and forth, and yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm definitely like exploring different things. I think what it would look like first, before I ever like got off Zoloft, it would probably look like a lower dosage first, which I actually have been playing around with a little bit. And that's been like, it's been a slow process. I'll say that. Yeah. Um, I feel like I am in like a really good like place in my life where I do feel like very grounded in myself, and like I know who I am and what I want, and I yeah.
So I'd love to hear like the gap when you started doing counseling to now, when you said you started to connect to your intuition and who you
Mm-hmm.
are, and now you're feeling the sense of groundedness. I'm curious, over that period of time, what all transpired?
Yeah, so when I started seeing a counselor regularly, like I'd seen many counselors over the years before that, but just nothing had quite been the right fit. Like it's actually, or for me anyways, it was really hard to find someone who was like a good fit. But yeah, anyways, when that started, I was in like a pretty, yeah, just very anxious all the time, having trouble getting out the front door, um, constantly in like people pleaser mode, and really just like didn't know who I was because everything was centered around like making sure I was like okay, basically like okay to get out the door, okay to do school, am I like pleasing everyone in my life kind of thing, and there's just no room for like
You?
me. So yeah, when I started seeing my counselor, like that was where I was at, and we started to just really like kind of pull things apart piece by piece, and kind of I was starting to figure out like, oh, like, you know, actually maybe this doesn't like sit right with me, like this is what I actually want, and like, oh, like this is how I feel about things, like, and as those little like realizations started happening for me, I started to communicate them to my partner at the time, and I think, no, I know that's what ended the relationship.
Yeah.
Like he broke up with me, but it was because I was like actually voicing what I wanted.
Change the dynamic of the
Totally,
relationship of what it originally was.
totally changed the
Yeah.
dynamic.
It's beautiful.
And yeah, but it was heartbreaking at the time. Um, and when that relationship ended, I think it's probably safe to say I like hit rock bottom. I was like, wow, this feels so terrible. I was like starting to like figure out and like voice who I am, and then it ended in like it brought up this like huge heartbreak. Like this person who I thought I was going to like, or I saw myself spending the rest of my life
Did
with.
you second guess the work you were doing with the counselor of like, wow, I'm doing this, I'm finding out who I am, and then, this breakup and I hit rock bottom?
Um, I questioned whether it was like worth it to just go on, period. I was just like, this, like, the amount of pain that I was in, so much of my identity at the time was wrapped up in that relationship, right? And, I was starting to figure out who I was, but it was like teeny tiny pieces. And so this huge chunk of my identity was just like gone, quite suddenly. And I was just like, okay, like, I could either just like throw in the towel and like just whatever, or B, like I can work through this, but like it's going to fucking suck, and like,
Is it worth it? Yeah.
and yeah, I had to decide in that moment like whether it was worth it for me. So there was never a moment where I felt like the work that I'd done was like not valuable, but it just, I didn't have like a foundation really, like, or very little foundation to fall back on. So I was like, hey, like, figure out how to like build this, or like, just kind of.
Looking back, do you see, like, how do you view it? How do you view that like that event in your life?
Um, it was, oh, I mean, I feel like it was the spark that like kind of got me. It was really like the first time I chose myself in like a very like significant way, I think. So it set me on a totally different path, I think, than I had ever been on before. Um,
Do you see it
yeah.
in like a positive or more negative
Oh,
light?
definitely positive, but it still like hurts to like look back on that. And it's not, I don't hold like any bitterness or like anything like that, but I can like definitely almost like time travel back to that point in time and just like kind of sit in it and just be like, wow, that like uh that was like excruciating. Like I really hope I don't have to go through that again.
But with
Um
every heartbreak, there's always like your heart's gonna be filled with the most amazing things, right?
yeah.
With every valley, there's a beautiful peak.
Yeah. I would say like looking back on that, it's how I handled that afterward. It's probably one of the things in my life that I'm most proud of. Um yeah, but it was
Was it like a catalyst for you to
yeah.
make some big changes or small changes?
It was just a catalyst to figure out who I was, and I had already started that process before, but I think that just made it like very like the urgency around it was like yeah, like I really dove in like head first, both feet, like um just figuring out who I was, like how to connect to my intuition, um, and where that would lead me, basically.
Can you share more of like what that means in your words of like finding out who you are and even intuition, like why that was important to you?
I think the essence of it for me is just uh, listening, like learning to listen to myself, and trying to find like a way to articulate it. It's
Or an easier question could just be like, how did you go about it? How did you start? Like, what was all part of that process of starting to find out who you are and connecting to your intuition?
I think a big part of it was like separating myself from maybe the circumstances I was in, or things that were like kind of going on around me. I think I had a tendency to take maybe the blame for like kind of anything that was going wrong around me. And I think that was like part of like the people pleaser like aspect too, and I think that was like such a big like red flag of like not knowing myself or or what I want. But yeah, I definitely felt like responsible for like everyone's like happiness around me. So yeah, kind of like getting to know myself was like getting to know what makes me happy, or just getting to know me at all, and then also like being able to separate like, you know, if that person's upset, it's not because I'm a bad person. It was like it's that, yeah, just kind of figuring out like where I end and like someone else begins, I guess. Like I think when you don't know yourself, you kind of like I did anyways. Like the boundaries are very like, yeah, they don't exist. And so like my identity was just like in circumstances and other people, and like it was just very like you end up having to like control the world around you to like feel okay.
Now, did you find this was all through counseling, or was there different ways that you started to uncover this? I'm curious to hear the specifics of what that looked like for you.
A lot of it was through counseling. That was my landing space for, like, I think pulling situations apart and just figuring out, like, where my wounds were, like, what sort of patterns were, you know, kind of coming from that wounded place, and, you know, kind of the ripple effects of that. But also, like, again, being able to, like, separate that from, like, who I am at my core, like, that I really did, like, having that sounding board to, like, talk to, really helped me, like, make sense of everything, because otherwise it's just, like, it's all, like, swirly in there.
Yeah, I get that. So you mentioned that through counseling, it was this wounded place that you were finding things coming from and patterns you're realizing. For someone like that, this is completely like unheard of. What does that mean? Like, did that affect your anxiety on a day-to-day basis? And what do you mean by like previous wounds and patterning?
Yeah, wounding and patterning. Basically how, like, I would explain it, or how I experienced it, and for me, like, it really, a lot of it goes back to, like, when I was, like, young. You know, something would happen that was, like, you know, upsetting for whatever reason, and, you know, the thought process then is, like, how do I make sure this never happens again? How do I protect myself from this, this hurt, instead of, like, you know, processing through it, and, like, healing from it. You kind of, like, or I ended up, like, holding on to those things, those wounds, and creating these, like, patterns. So, like, okay, I'll just make sure this, like, never happens again. And it's funny, like, I guess a lot of the, like, wounding or the hurtful things that happened, like, when I was really young in my life, I think it came from expressing myself, or, like, vocalizing things, and it got to the point for me where I was just like, hey, it's not safe to speak, and so I just became, like, more and more careful about what I said, when I said it, who I said it to. And then, you know, that because I wasn't processing those things, those wounds, you hold on to it and, like, put up wall after wall after wall of, like, this is what's going to keep me safe, and, like, okay, now this happened, so I have to do this now to, like, keep me safe. And I just ended up being in a place where, like, eventually I couldn't really talk to anybody, because, like, nothing was safe, and it just, and the fear around it became, like, so extreme that, like, even if I wanted to, like, talk to somebody, my brain would just, like, shut down, like, like, frozen in fear, like, yeah. And it got to the point where, like, I would want to say something and I couldn't, because, like, literally just, my brain wouldn't let me. Like, there was just so full protection mode.
Yeah, I definitely have felt that. And
yeah.
I know a lot of folks watching with ADHD, or if they also suffer from anxiety, that same thing of the brain just shutting down because of a past wound and the patterning, like you mentioned. Is there, if you're willing to share a specific, like, memory that comes up and you're like, oh, that was so painful that I kept replaying in my mind, and how to work through?
There are. I'm trying to think of one that I'm, like, okay to share.
You don't need to share. It's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ones, and again, it's, like, very early on, I was in grade 2, and I was at a new school, and so already that was, like, hard. And so were like, we had this project where we had to like write a letter. We had gone to like an art gallery or something, and there was like 3 different artists, and we got to pick our favorite artists and like write them a letter. And one of the artists was he was the father to like one of the boys in my class, and the boy sitting next to me was writing to him, and he's just like, oh, I don't know what to write. And I'm like, here I am like trying to make friends, and I made this like, I'm like, oh, well, I'll make this joke and like make him laugh and we'll become friends. And I was just like, oh, just write that like his art was like really dumb, and like I just like sarcastic comment, like wasn't meant to be taken seriously, but I, like maybe at a grade 2 level it's
trying to be cool and fit in,
not like quite gonna land. And so he took the joke seriously, and he was just like, how could you say something so mean? And he was like, went and told the kid whose dad that was, and I was like mortified, and I was like, okay, so I can't talk to anybody in this class. And yeah, it was just little things like that where it's like, I think, you know, it's probably not like the best joke to make, but
you're in grade 2.
At the end of the day, it wasn't like said with malice, you know, and I think there was like conversations that could have been had around that where like I would have like felt okay and felt safe to like talk to kids,
but little
like
you was like traumatized.
Yeah, I was just like, I don't know anybody, and now everyone in this class thinks that I'm like this mean-spirited, like horrible person. Yeah, so that's just one thing. Like I was already struggling at that point.
Yeah, and then that leads to I need to please people, because if I say the wrong thing or say something, then it's going to be met with people not liking me or saying something, or I don't know if that rings true for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think, yeah, like I said, I was already kind of struggling at that point, but like it just seemed like each interaction
like proved what
I was afraid of. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, it did end up like getting to like a really bad place where like I just wasn't talking to anybody, and I did really needed someone to pull me out of that. Because I think because I had been struggling with it for so long, it just felt so much just a part of who I was, and something that like couldn't be changed or fixed. Like I couldn't remember a time like ever being comfortable speaking. So I was like, if I never experienced that, like I didn't know what I was like missing out on.
Yeah, and you're safe.
Yeah.
Safe is what we want.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know before you were saying this, I want to bring up, but the question I want to ask is, when you think of like your biggest wounds or these really big fears, and then thinking to now where I know you face some of these or are starting to, do you feel like they're your greatest gifts, or the things that fulfill you the most? Or will fulfill you?
Oh,
Or the thing that you need?
It's an idea I'm only starting to, I think, play with or realize. I think, so one thing about me that's always been true is that I've always loved to sing. I've always loved to use my voice in that way, and that has been constant throughout my life. Like, and I think I never really drew that kind of like, I don't know, like comparison of like how much I struggled to like speak with like how enjoyable singing was. So yeah, I think like, I think it is interesting that like the thing that I have struggled with the most in my life like actually does bring me like such incredible joy, and like always has. But it has been like a process to kind of like unlock the other side of that, like or even just like share that. Like I've never, no, not that I've never like sung in front of anybody, but like it is like a hard thing to share with other people, because I feel like I know all my flaws, like when it comes to like speaking and using my voice, like and I think the fear that's like still there for me is like, well, I've come a long way in like in, you know, speaking and using my voice. I think there is still a fear that I will be met with like judgment in some way.
Same like wounds and patterns.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I may, and I've seen this in my own life again and again, every time I face like my biggest fear, my deepest shadow, like those big wounds, it's always the thing that like fulfills me, or it's a thing that like fulfills like this desire that maybe I didn't even know I had. I was like, oh, I've always wanted this for my life, and now that I've faced this, like this part of me feels like complete in a way. And for me, it was also using my voice. Another one I'm working through is being seen in all aspects. Another one was just like femininity. Had one of fear of heights and falling, and I find my greatest freedom in being in the air and flying as close as I can. And I know when we were just talking before recording, what you needed the most is like growing up was like, you know, regulate your nervous system, and you're trying to do that, but it was met with like, I don't know the details of, this isn't safe to do, you shouldn't be doing that, that's bad. So the thing you needed that would have, you know, saved you or helped you was created another wound, it sounds like.
That's another like big part of my journey. There's a lot to say about that.
If I may, if we can get a little spiritual, like I fully believe that when we're placed on this earth as souls, that like our purpose and what's gonna like light our soul on fire and fulfill us is not something that we're like, oh, that's so easy to do, and like I'm from day one I'm fulfilled. It's like our journey here is to grow our soul and to come back to who we are innately. And that's why I believe like our biggest wounds, like the biggest struggles, are actually the thing that we need to face to grow our soul and come back to what fulfills us and our purpose on earth. And I also kind of believe with that, like folks with, you know, ADHD, anxiety, or any other mental disorder that's really debilitating, we just have more layers of the onion to unwrap. And I think that's actually a beautiful thing, because our growth is probably going to be more uncomfortable than someone else's, but with more, you know, ROI, bigger risk, bigger discomfort, bigger reward, and we can help so many more people because of that.
I 100% agree. And honestly, like the further I've kind of gone down this journey of, you know, healing and self-discovery, like no part of it has been easy, but it is so rewarding. And I'm so grateful, like the further that I go down, like there was definitely a time kind of at the start where I was just like, why am I the one who has to like deal with this? Like, I don't want to deal with this sucks. But yeah, the further I kind of get into it, the more like definitely the more gratitude I have for the journey. Like just so much good comes from doing that work.
It's funny you say that, and I don't say I loved hearing that you had a rock bottom in your life, and I've had many, and I know like, you know, we probably had many like other, you know, more, not just one that felt like, you know, literally the end of the world, or, you know, in the time was just really stressful or traumatic. But every time that happens, it's like opening the way for something bigger and greater to come in, right? It's like shaking up what's there. It's like getting rid of what you don't need, that you've outgrown, and like you've flown the nest. If you would have stayed in that partnership, like it wouldn't have served you. You wouldn't have grown. It had to happen. It had to shake you up, so you like took real action to be like, I need to change some things.
100%. Yeah, it's the stuff that you kind of let go from or go away from, like that is what like opens space for the things that are like the right fit.
Yeah, that are what your soul needs and desires, and that path forward, right? It's the uncomfortable times, the things that are so painful is where we find, like, the pleasures, where we find the growth.
Yeah, and I feel like that journey has also, like, equipped me so well, just with, you know, the things that life has thrown at me since then. It definitely, like, lends a totally different, like, perspective. Like, now I'm going, like, when I'm going through something, it's not, I don't, like, identify with it anymore. I think that's the biggest difference now. It's not something that's, like, intrinsically wrong with me. Yeah. It's just something that I'm experiencing.
It's not who you are.
Yeah, so I think that's been, like, the biggest change for me. And also just kind of, like, circling back to the meds, that's where I'm now kind of in this headspace where I'm like, yeah, maybe, like, I can start to, like, you know, wean off of it. But again, I'm not, like, in a hurry to, like, I don't want to hurry that process. Yeah, I'll say that. And, like, you know, if I do get to a place where it's just like, oh, like, you know, it really does serve me just to be on this, like, low dose, I think I've made my peace with that, like, whatever way it goes. Like, I'm good with it. Yeah. But yeah, I've been looking into other things too. I don't know if I told you, like, even, like, microdosing with psilocybin.
Yeah, psilocybin.
Psilocybin.
Yeah,
I always stumble over that word. And that's been like a really beautiful process to, like, explore. So I think, like, that's kind of the direction that I'm headed in more so, and we'll just kind of see where it goes.
What does, like, your daily life look like right now? Because you're like, I'm on a good dose of meds. I feel good. I mean, you run your own business. What's, like, a typical day? Yeah, what do you do in a day to maybe come back to yourself, or to, like, manage the anxiety, or to regulate your nervous system? Is there certain things you go through?
Yeah, there are certain things that I like to do every day, and these are actually practices that I implemented in one way or another, like, way before I ever started taking meds or started seeing a counselor. And it's all stuff that, like, was helpful at the time, but it just wasn't quite enough at the time. But I still continue to, like, use, because it helps, like, regulate, come back to myself, and just feel, like, good for the day. So one of them, in the morning, I really like to be woken up by the sun. By, like, natural light. So I feel like that's a big one. That's hard because my partner does not like that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. But, like, as often as I can, I like to be, like, the sun to wake me up. And then one of the first things I do in the morning is walk outside barefoot.
Yeah, grounding.
And basically what that looks like for me is, it's just like, we have chickens, so, like, the walk across the lawn to the chicken coop to let them out in the morning, like, if that's all I get in the morning, like, that's totally fine. But yeah, I love to do that. And then, yeah, I love to be barefoot as often as possible throughout the day.
Me, myself as well.
Yeah, so that's a big one for me. If I can, like, get out beyond the yard and, like, do a walk, that's great, but I also don't like to necessarily, like, put pressure on myself to do that. But yeah, being outside, literally physically touching nature, big one.
Very grounding.
Yeah. And another big one for me has been, but I kind of go, like, in and out of this, like, I have seasons where I'm, like, really into these things, and then seasons where I kind of, like, let it fall to the wayside. But journaling has been a big one. But again, I don't put pressure on myself to, like, like, if it doesn't feel like it's serving me at the time, like, I don't force it. But right now I'm journaling like crazy, like, every day I'll just, like, unload.
Is it more of you just, like, unloading what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, or do you follow certain prompts for your journaling? Oh, for the season that you're in right now?
For the season that I'm in right now, it's just unloading, and I find with like that style of journaling, it does help me to like organize my thoughts. And it brings me like clarity, just just where I'm at, like where I'm going, and it's also just like a release too, I would say. Like now it's out on paper, I don't have to like hold on to it. I don't have to worry about it. It's good. We're good.
I love how you said seasons, because that's just so true, us being humans, where we can't stick to like one process all the time and expect it to do what it's supposed to do for us. Like, if you're like, I need to always go for a 20-minute walk at this time of the day, it's going to, yes, like, it's good for your health, your well-being, your grounding, your barefoot. But if it's not what you need mentally, because you're like, maybe you want to journal, maybe you want to actually do work, maybe you want to do something else, because like that's what's really going to like feel good to me and like connect back to me. And I feel like that changes sometimes on a daily basis or through seasons.
Yeah. 100%. The other like big one for me is touch. So whether that's just like, we have a cat, so I'll like pick her up and like hug her, or I'll hug my partner. He's not like a hug, well, he's just not super touchy-feely. Like he'll like, I feel like he will indulge me in that, and like I will take it.
It's so beautiful. Like, I talk about this all the time of regulating your nervous system through touch, like skin on skin contact. Like, I always just touch my skin.
Huge.
And if you have a partner to co-regulate, if they're already regulated, like, oh, it's so powerful.
Yeah, so that's a big one. And I do like self-touch too. Like, it was something actually my mom and both my grandmas used to do, like the arm tickle when I was a kid, and I just found like that immediately, like whatever I was going through, I was like immediately relaxed. So I sometimes just like do that to myself if I feel like I need to like come back down into my body. That's a big one.
Like animals, like if they're on your chest, like it's just more potent, and if they're regulated, they can regulate you like right away.
It's funny how they pick up on that too. I find, like, not all the time, but if I'm like needing to like experience that, like our cat will usually pick up and like walk over to me.
The energy.
Yeah. So she's really great for that. My partner, I usually have to prompt, but he's like.
But he'll be there.
He's
for
responsive
you.
And he'll be there. Yeah.
I love that. And going back to even the seasons of the things you do in, you know, a regular basis, this is why I always call them like systems, because if I feel like if you have a routine, you're like, this is what I must do, and it's that pressure, which, you know, in your case may cause more anxiety. I know for myself, it definitely created that anxiety, or the energy behind it was one of like self-loathing or shame of like, if you don't do this, then you're like failing, or like you're not good enough, or you're not doing enough, versus having that flexibility of like, it's just a system. It's, you know, this is what I generally do. This is the framework of my day, that to include, you know, some time outside, whatever that looks like.
You struggled with like perfectionism?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like my story with, you know, diagnosed ADHD, I feel if I would have went for a diagnosis of anxiety, that probably would have came up. Because I was definitely diagnosed, like, depression. I know I struggled with OCD, but when you go for the diagnosis, it's like, well, I was looking for a certain diagnosis. So,
Yeah, because I know that was, like, a big one for me, too. Like, and I think it just comes from, like, just an overall feeling of like not being safe.
Yeah. And this is like, if I can just interject, is what I really talk about all the time of, we're taught when we're younger that in order to feel safe, it needs to look a certain way, or to be loved a certain way, and then if we don't feel safe, our nervous system is just dysregulated, and we're constantly just trying to come back to a regulated or a safe place, and we can't. So we just stay in a dysregulated place because it's easier.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a lot to say about that.
Oh,
but yeah,
nervous systems.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah. Is there anything else as we wrap up that you want to share if someone's watching, they have, anxiety and struggling with it, or, something similar that maybe for you was that ray of light that kind of helped you move forward? Or think of even who you were 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, what you would tell yourself then.
It's so funny, I've kind of explored this a little bit with my counselor, and I'm never quite sure what to go back and tell myself, because I do really believe that everything happened the way it was supposed to happen, and so I get kind of funny about changing it.
Maybe that's it. You're not changing it, but just telling her this is happening for a reason. This is happening for for your beautiful growth.
And I think just to I think the big lesson that I learned was to give myself grace, and that gave me space to accept help, and to kind of expand what that help might look like. I would, that my whole journey of getting from probably my two rock bottoms were probably when I was 15, and then when I was going through that breakup, which was, how old was I? 30 or 31. It took a long time to figure out, dial in what works for me. So I think what I would say is just keep trying stuff. And if you do, you will figure it out. You will figure it out.
I feel like you uncovered who you were. And I feel it sounds like that process was really just who am I coming back to you.
Yeah.
And then the actual tactics, actual things you do, the actual steps fell into place. But it sounds like the underlying theme was really just find out who you are.
So just keep trying. There's honestly, I do believe there's not really a right or wrong way to go about it. If that's your goal and your focus, you will,
I love that,
get there. It's always
the journey.
Yeah.
I always come with and I say this too, is having an open mind or being curious. We actually, myself and another gal, Danny, did a show on curiosity. It's getting curious of what's working, what's not working, what am I feeling, what am I not feeling. And I feel when we approach it with this open mind and curiosity, it's you're not doing wrong. You're just on this journey of okay, this is working. No, it's not working. That's okay. What can I change?
Yeah, totally. And I think not to carry on, but the big thing for me too, and this was again what we touched on this, working with the counselor, was changing the stories that I was telling myself. Yeah. And it does help to have somebody who has an objective view. I honestly can't recommend counseling enough. If you can find the right fit, it's
or some sort of mentor, coach, therapist, whatever that looks
that
or available
board.
to you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. Always.
Yeah.
Well, this was amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, Nicole, and sharing your story. Is there any last words you want to share? Does that feel complete?
Feels complete.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I loved our conversation, and I didn't know all of that before we started filming. I made it very candid. I was let's just talk, and I just want to know. And how this came to be is we were chatting about anxiety and ADHD one day, and I was we should just do this and film this. I think this will be really beneficial for folks. And she's like, yeah, I know I need to use my voice. I have this intuitive pull to use my voice. It's what I'm meant to do in this world. And we kind of put that aside, and she reached out. She's like, let's make this happen. So we did. And I just want you to know that is a big fear of hers. She shared her journey and her story of like using her voice and speaking up, and not just people pleasing and not staying quiet and shutting down. So I want to give her so much love and praise for her facing her big fear and doing this conversation with myself today. And go ahead and comment what your takeaways were, if you have any questions for Nicole, and if you like the style of interview kind of conversation video, and I'll do more of them for you. I'll see you next time. Bye.